LANSA's Flight 508 was struck by lightning during a tropical storm and broke apart in midair. Days later, deep in the Amazon rainforest, search teams found a young girl walking alone among the trees. She had fallen from more than 3,000 meters and survived. Survivor's guilt is the trauma of those who remain when everyone else is gone. And you, what would you do if you were? It was Christmas Eve 1971 at Lima Airport. Families embraced in haste, struggling through the chaos of luggage and last-minute goodbyes. Flight LANSA 508 bound for Pucallpa was the last of the day, a journey of just over an hour across the Andes and the vast Amazon rainforest. For many, it was just another trip. For others, a long-awaited return home. Among the passengers was Juliane Koepcke, a 17-year-old girl, daughter of 2 German scientists devoted to studying the Peruvian jungle. She knew the sound of tropical winds, the smell of wet earth, and the respect one must have for the forest. But she could never have imagined that. Within hours, she would be thrown into its heart. The Lockheed Electra's cabin seemed peaceful. The hum of conversation blended with the steady rhythm of the engines. Some passengers read newspapers. Others drifted to sleep, comforted by the thought of a Christmas spent with family. Few paid attention to the fact that LANSA already had a grim reputation: aging aircraft, poor maintenance, and a series of fatal crashes that had tainted its name. Still, the flight departed on time. Through the windows, Lima faded beneath a blanket of gray clouds. The roar of the engines grew louder, and with it, a subtle sense of unease, the kind of silence that comes just before the unexpected. At 12:36 p.m., LANSA Flight 508 flew straight into the heart of a tropical storm. Outside, clouds rose like living walls, swallowing the aircraft in seconds. Lightning slashed across the Andean sky, turning the cabin interior into flashes of light and shadow. The sound of rain striking the fuselage blended with the thunderous roar of the engines. Inside the Lockheed Electra, everything changed. The air grew heavy, the noise sharper. Passengers exchanged silent looks, trying to understand the creaks and tremors vibrating beneath their feet. The plane lurched violently, first a sudden drop, then a sharp climb. Overhead compartments burst open, glasses shattered, and fear spread through the cabin like electricity in the air. Then came the flash. A bolt of lightning struck the right wing, and for an instant the entire sky turned white. The explosion that followed was deafening. The passengers barely had time to realize what was happening. The aircraft began to disintegrate in midair. Panels tore loose, the fuselage ripped apart, and the rushing wind screamed through the cabin like a living force. Still strapped to their seats, passengers were torn from the plane amid a storm of wreckage. Juliane felt her body pulled into the void. The seatbelt was the only thing keeping her from instant death. In seconds, she was falling through the sky, still attached to her seat, spinning among fragments of metal, luggage, and debris. The sound was a deafening roar, and then only wind. The world became a whirl of green and gray. For a brief moment, Juliane saw the vast expanse of the jungle below, a living ocean of trees rushing toward her. And then, everything went dark. Juliane Koepcke fell from more than 3,000 meters, still strapped to her seat. For a few seconds, the world lost all direction. The air roared, her body spun, and the storm above turned into a blur of clouds and lightning. Speed no longer had meaning. In the middle of that chaos, Juliane caught glimpses of fragments, a piece of wing, a suitcase, the glint of twisted metal spinning beside her. The wind sloshed against her face like blades. The force of the fall blurred the line between fear and unconsciousness. Then the seat began to rotate slowly, stabilizing, a motion that perhaps saved her life. The dense air above the rainforest and the heavy humidity helped slow her descent. Below her stretched a vast, endless green, an ocean of trees waiting silently. Then came the impact. The first treetops caught her like fragile hands. Branches snapped, leaves tore apart, and the seat was swallowed whole by the forest canopy. The crash echoed for a heartbeat, and then only silence. The faint drizzle resumed, joined by the distant hum of insects. Juliane awoke hours later, lying in the damp mud, surrounded by fragments of leaves and fabric. Sunlight filtered weakly through the canopy, turning the humid air into streaks of gold. She didn't know where she was or how long she had been unconscious. Her body felt heavy, her face throbbed, and her right arm was covered in dried blood. One eye was swollen shut. Her collarbone was broken. Each breath stabbed her chest with pain. She tried to move. The seat was still nearby, tangled in roots and vines, its belt torn. One shoe was missing. The other leg was bleeding. The smell of wet soil mingled with faint traces of smoke and fuel, the last ghosts of the crash. Around her, the jungle was alive. Mosquitoes whined in her ears, cicadas screamed in the heat. Raindrops dripped from the leaves, one by one, like the ticking of a clock. At every sound, Juliane turned her head, listening, hoping. Wind? An animal? A human voice? Nothing. Slowly, panic gave way to realization. She was alone. Alone in the heart of the Amazon, miles from any village, without food, without shelter, and without knowing which way to go. And yet, in the middle of the pain, confusion, and fear, there was one undeniable truth. She was alive. Against every law of chance, alive. She tried to recall what her parents, both zoologists, had taught her. In the jungle, follow the water. Where there's water, there's life, and maybe people. Those words echoed now like instinct. Still dizzy, she looked around, recognizing shapes she knew from books and expeditions. The towering roots, the broad leaves, the scent of fertile earth. Familiar and yet utterly foreign. Every attempt to stand made the world spin. Her vision blurred. Nausea surged. She fell back to the ground, gasping, her breathing tangled with sobs. She cried quietly, not out of fear, but out of the sheer vastness surrounding her. The jungle felt infinite, and she was just one small life, suspended inside it. Juliane Koepcke moved like a ghost among the trees. Every step was a battle, every sound of the jungle, a reminder that she was still alive. Her body throbbed with pain, a broken collarbone, festering cuts, but her mind clung to a single rule her father had taught her. Follow the water, he used to say. A stream will lead to a river, and a river will lead to people. She stumbled aimlessly through roots and mud until the faint murmur of running water reached her ears. A narrow, clear creek cut through the dark soil. It became her compass. She drank from it with cupped hands, the taste of life and earth mixed together. At night she slept beneath fallen trunks, wrapping herself in leaves, her only companions the hum of insects and the weight of fear. Days blurred into one another. The sun rose and fell beyond the canopy, and Juliane measured time only by the shifting light. Along her path she found fragments of the plane, torn seats, twisted metal, suitcases split open by the crash. In one she discovered half-melted candies. They would keep her alive for the next several days. Among the wreckage, horror intertwined with memory. Bodies of passengers lay half-buried under leaves, already claimed by the forest. She looked away quickly, refusing to linger on the faces she could no longer recognize. The silence around them was heavier than the thunder that had once torn the sky apart. As she pressed forward, the heat grew unbearable. Her wounds worsened. Flies laid eggs in the open gashes, and she did what she could to clean them, pressing the skin, forcing the larvae out, enduring the pain in silence. Still, she walked. Always forward. At night, the jungle transformed. Birdsong faded, replaced by the croaks of frogs and the shrill chorus of cicadas. The darkness was absolute. Even the sky seemed to vanish. She slept fitfully, waking at every rustle or whisper of movement. And every dawn she rose again to follow the water, as if the current itself whispered, "Keep going." On the 8th day she found a larger piece of the plane, a section of fuselage smothered in moss resting between giant trees. Scattered papers, rusted metal, a faint sweet smell, fruit perhaps, or decay. She turned away. That place held only death. The rain made progress slower. Sometimes the creek swelled into a torrent, other times it vanished beneath the ground. She began to walk directly in the water, letting it wash the insects from her legs. By day, the sun burned her skin. By night, the cold made her shiver uncontrollably. Yet with every step, the forest seemed to change, less menacing, more alive. It was as if the jungle were testing her, then slowly accepting her presence. By the 10th day, exhaustion had hollowed her body. Her legs trembled, her voice was almost gone. Then a sound, a faint mechanical hum carried by the wind. A motor. Heart pounding, Juliane pushed through the undergrowth until she reached a clearing. There, by the riverbank, a small wooden boat rocked gently in the water. Nearby, clothes hung from a line and a few cooking pots still smoked faintly. She tried to call out, but her voice cracked into a whisper. Moments later, 3 men appeared from the trees. Local loggers, stunned by the sight of the frail, mud-covered girl. Juliane tried to speak Spanish, but the words dissolved between sobs and exhaustion. Finally, she managed to say, "I'm the only one left." From the plane. Crashed. Silence. Then one of them stepped forward, offering her a cup of water. After 10 endless days in the jungle, Juliane was no longer alone. Juliane was rescued by a group of loggers and taken by canoe down the river to the nearest village. She could barely keep her eyes open, yet she recognized the sound of the current, the same rhythm that had guided her for 10 endless days. From there, a small plane flew her back to Lima, the sole survivor of LANSA Flight 508. News spread rapidly, the girl who fell from the sky and lived. Headlines around the world told her story, while rescue teams confirmed what she already knew, that almost no one else had made it. To many it was a miracle. To Juliane it was a wound that time would never fully close. Instead of turning her back on the jungle, she chose to understand it. Following in her parents' footsteps, she became a biologist, devoting her life to studying the same Amazon rainforest that had nearly taken it. Among trees, rivers, and species, known only to a few, she transformed fear into fascination, trauma into purpose. Decades later, Juliane returned to the crash site. The forest was just as silent as before, yet something within her had changed. Where there had once been terror, there was now reverence. Her story had become a symbol of human resilience, proof that life, however fragile, can endure even when everything seems lost. The gentle murmur of the river closes her journey. Dawn breaks over the forest, and with the light, a rebirth, the triumph of a life that refused to disappear. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and share. Subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next episode of The Last Survivor.